The blood never came out easy. Maya knew that, had known it since her first rotation through Kandahar, where the field station floors were perpetually rust-colored, no matter how many times you scrubbed them down. But here in this forgotten corner of northern Montana, in this undersized clinic that smelled like mildew and old coffee, the blood was fresh, and it was hers to clean. She pressed the bristle brush harder against the linoleum, her knuckles white, her jaw locked. 12 degrees outside. The wind hit the windows like something with a grudge. "Slower," Dr. Thorne said from behind her, not looking up from his desk. "You missed the grout lines, again." She didn't answer. "You know," he continued, folding a patient chart with the lazy precision of a man who had never been told. "No, I did you a favor taking you on here. Someone with your history, your record. Most places wouldn't touch you." Maya kept scrubbing. The brush moved in tight circles. She counted her breaths the way her old team leader had taught her, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The kind of breathing you did when you needed to keep your hands steady before they gave you a reason to use them. "No future," Thorne said almost to himself. "That's your situation. No career, no family, no—" The window exploded inward. Not broke, exploded. Safety glass shredding in every direction, a gust of -15 air screaming through the gap, and then the body, a man, massive 200+ pounds of dead weight, folding through the frame and hitting the floor hard enough to shake the ceiling tiles. The dog came through right after him. A German shepherd, black and tan, a working harness still buckled across his chest and caked in ice. He landed on all 4 feet, spun immediately, and went to parade rest directly over the man's chest, head low, eyes locked on Maya. A sound came out of him that wasn't quite a bark. It was older than that. It was warning. "Good God!" Thorne knocked his chair back, scrambling to his feet. Maya was already moving. The man on the floor was conscious barely. His lips were moving. She got within 3 feet, and the dog lunged, not biting, placing his body between them, 85 pounds of pure muscle and training. She stopped, raised her hands slowly, looked at the dog, not the man. "Os," she said. Flat, certain. The dog hesitated. 1 second. 2. "Os." He stepped back 6 inches, still watching her, still ready. She dropped to her knees beside the man. He was shaking, and not from the cold. She'd seen this before, this specific kind of shaking, the kind that came from somewhere the thermometer couldn't measure. His hands were clenched around nothing. Fingers white, fighting something that wasn't in the room. Echo team, fall back to..." His voice was raw, tearing. "Kowalski, get down, get down!" Kowalski was dead. Maya didn't know that yet, but she knew those names. She knew that voice. She'd heard it in 20 different men, coming out of 20 different nightmares in 20 different recovery rooms, and it never got easier to hear. She put one hand flat on his sternum, firm, present. "Hey, hey." Her voice dropped to the register she'd learned worked. Not soft, not commanding, certain. "You're stateside. You're out. I need you to look at my face." His eyes, gray, shot through with something desperate, found hers. "There you go," she said. "Stay there." Thorne appeared at her shoulder. "We need to call the sheriff. This man is clearly... Get the crash cart." "Excuse me." She stood up, turned, and looked at him with exactly the eyes that had once cleared a room full of armed men in Helmand Province. "Get the crash cart and prime the O-negative, now." He went. She got the man Liam, his dog tag said, though she didn't have time to read the rest onto the gurney by herself. The dog didn't interfere. He paced, tracking her every movement, but he didn't interfere. She cut the jacket off with trauma shears. The thermal layer beneath was soaked through black red, still warm at the center. She peeled it back and stopped. 1 breath. Then she looked again because she needed to be sure. 3 entry wounds. Tight grouping. Upper left chest below the clavicle angled slightly downward. Not birdshot. Not a hunting rifle. She'd written enough incident reports to know the pattern. This was a 7.62 round full metal jacket fired from distance from someone who knew exactly where to aim to punch through soft body armor and still leave a man breathing long enough to run. Because you don't want him dead on the mountain. You want him to lead you somewhere first. The wind hit the broken window again, a long, hollow moan, and somewhere out in the wall of white beyond the tree line, nothing moved. Nothing visible anyway. Maya pulled on her gloves, snapped them tight at the wrist. Whatever was out there in that storm had followed this man here, and it hadn't knocked. She worked through the night. No sleep. No breaks. Just the metronome of the heart monitor, the hiss of the oxygen line, and the wind screaming itself hoarse against the plywood she'd duct-taped over the broken window. Liam Cross flatlined twice before 3 a.m. Twice she brought him back. The second time she had to crack his sternum with her palm, no paddles, no warning, and the sound it made was something she'd carry for a long time. But his heart caught, stumbled, held. Zeus never left the floor beside the gurney. He lay with his chin on his forepaws, eyes tracking every needle, every bag of saline, every movement of Maya's hands. When the monitor screamed the second time, the dog stood up. He didn't bark. He just stood there watching her like he was asking a question he already knew the answer to. She answered it. She always did. By 5 a.m., Liam's vitals had steadied into something she could live with. Not good. Survivable. Thorne appeared in the doorway just after dawn began to gray the windows. He had his coat on, his keys in his hand. He'd slept in his office, which told Maya everything she needed to know about the man. "I've made a decision," he said. "When the county road opens couple hours, maybe 3, I'm calling the sheriff's office. This man has gunshot wounds. I'm legally required." "He's a federal officer," Maya said without turning around. "You don't know that. I know what those rounds were fired from. And I know what that harness on that dog means." She nodded toward Zeus. "That's a military working dog harness. Modified. Someone cut the unit patch off, but the D-ring placement is Tier 1 configuration." She finally looked at Thorne. "So no, you're not calling the sheriff?" Thorne's jaw tightened. "This isn't your clinic." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." He left. She heard him lock his office door. The storm hadn't quit. If anything, it had gotten worse, the kind of February Montana blizzard that didn't care about your schedule or your emergencies. The trees beyond the window were invisible. The parking lot was a flat, white nothing. That's when Zeus moved. He stood, shook himself once like a man rolling his shoulders before a job, walked to the side door, the narrow one that opened toward the tree line, and sat down in front of it. Then he looked back at her over his shoulder. "No," she said. He looked at the door. "It's -20 out there." He pawed the door handle. Once. Deliberate. She stared at him for a long moment. He stared back, and there was nothing dog-like about that stare. It was the stare of something that had made a decision and was waiting on the slow human to catch up. She opened the door. He went through it like a shot, hit the snow at full stride, and disappeared into the white wall. She grabbed her coat off the hook, pulled on her boots without lacing them, and went after him. The cold hit her like a door swung hard. Her lungs contracted. The snow was knee-deep in places, hip-deep where it had drifted against the tree line, and the wind was moving it sideways so that she could barely see 6 feet in front of her face. She followed the tracks, paw prints already half-filled, vanishing fast, and found Zeus at the base of a boulder 15 yards into the tree line. He was digging, not scratching, digging. Both front paws working furiously through packed snow and frozen earth, and she could see blood on his pads. The ice was cutting him, but he didn't stop. He made a low, urgent sound and kept going. "Zeus!" Her voice broke a little on the word. "Zeus, stop! You're hurting yourself." He didn't stop. She got down beside him and started moving snow with her hands, and 30 seconds later, her fingers hit metal. Smooth. cold in a way that was different from stone. She pulled it free. A titanium cylinder roughly the size of a road flare sealed at both ends with a pressure cap. The kind of container that survived helicopter crashes and river crossings and 3 days in the Hindu Kush without a scratch. Zeus sat back and watched her open it. Inside, wrapped in a waterproof sleeve, a USB drive, a burner phone, and a manila folder thick sealed with a red classification stripe. She peeled the stripe back, opened the folder. The first page was a surveillance photograph, grainy long lens taken from distance. A man in a suit outside a building she recognized. Below it a name. Dates. Wire transfer records. It was a corruption file, the kind that ended careers, ended freedom, possibly ended lives. The subject's name was printed clearly across the header. Deputy Director Alan Sterling, FBI. Her hands had stopped feeling the cold. She turned to the second page, and the world tilted. It was a photograph of her. Not recent, older, taken in uniform. Below it, typed in clean black letters, was a name she hadn't used in 4 years. Major Harper Quinn, USSOCOM Medical, status buried. And below that, handwritten in the cramped block print of someone trained to write in moving vehicles and bad light. Quinn, you're the only one left who saw what happened in Kabul. Sterling knows you're alive. I'm coming to you, Cross. Zeus pressed his bleeding paw against her knee and held it there. She looked at the man's tracks leading back to the shattered window. Liam Cross hadn't stumbled into her clinic on accident. He hadn't been running. He'd been navigating. She had 40 minutes, maybe less. Maya came back through the side door with the titanium cylinder tucked under her arm, and Zeus limping at her heel, leaving small red prints on the white linoleum. She went straight to Liam's gurney, checked his pressure low, but holding, and pulled the blanket up to his chin. He hadn't moved, wouldn't move for hours yet. She looked at his face for a moment. Hard jaw, 3 days of beard, a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, like someone had tried to take his smile away. Even unconscious, even this broken, there was something in the set of his features that she recognized. The same thing she saw in the mirror on the days she still looked. She wrapped Zeus's paws herself, cutting medical gauze into strips, working fast. The dog sat perfectly still through it, watching the front windows with an attention that had nothing to do with the storm. Then his ears went up. Both of them. Hard. Pivoting forward like antennas locking onto a signal. Maya heard it 3 seconds later. Engines. More than one. Heavy, high clearance, the kind of suspension that didn't come standard. Coming fast from the access road despite the snow, which meant they had chains, which meant they'd planned for this terrain, which meant they hadn't stumbled onto this place. She killed the overhead lights, moved to the window. 3 black SUVs government plates, or plates that looked government from a distance. They came in hard and parked in a loose perimeter around the entrance, and the men who got out were not sheriff's deputies. They moved in 2-man stacks, weapons indexed low, wearing civilian winter gear over what she could tell was plate carrier armor underneath. Her stomach went cold and still. The lead man was tall, silver-haired. He walked like someone who hadn't been told no in a decade straight, spine, loose hands, the kind of deliberate calm that was its own form of violence. He wore a badge on his belt. Even from here, through the frosted glass, she could read the shape of it. FBI. Sterling. She had maybe 15 seconds. She grabbed the titanium cylinder and shoved it into the ceiling tile above the supply cabinet. 3rd tile from the left, she counted it twice. She pocketed the USB drive. Then she moved to Liam's gurney, grabbed the side rail, and started pushing him toward the back hallway. The front door came off its hinges before she made it 6 feet. "Nobody move." Sterling's voice was boardroom flat, the voice of a man used to giving orders in marble lobbies. 4 of his men came in behind him, fanning out, weapons raised. "Step away from the patient." Maya stopped, raised her hands, kept her body between them and Liam. "Deputy Director," she kept her voice level. "This man is in critical condition. Whatever you think he's done, he's a federal fugitive and a material threat to national security. Sterling walked toward her slowly, like he had the rest of the morning. Step aside, Major. The word hit her like a slap. He knew. He'd always known. Thorne appeared from the hallway. He hadn't been in his office. He'd been waiting by the back window, and now he came forward with his hands up and his face already arranged into the expression of a man trying to trade information for safety. She's been interfering with your operation since he arrived, Thorne said quickly. She has a file, a cylinder, titanium. Where is it? Sterling said, still looking at Maya. Gone, she said. The nearest operative moved to flank her. She tracked him and her peripheral vision didn't turn. Sterling stopped 3 feet away. He looked at her for a moment, with the flat assessment of someone checking a column of numbers. Then he looked past her at Liam, unconscious, pale, entirely helpless on the gurney, and something shifted in his expression. Not hesitation. Something worse than that. Decision. He nodded to the man on his left. The operative raised his weapon. Zeus came off the ground. There was no warning bark, no growl. Just 85 pounds of working dog launching from a dead standstill, crossing 12 feet of open floor in less time than it takes to register it happened. He hit the operative's extended arm at the wrist, not the hand. The wrist and the weapon discharged into the ceiling as the man went down, screaming. Sterling spun, leveled his own weapon. The shot was flat and sharp in the enclosed space, and Zeus made a sound that Maya had never heard a living thing make before, and then he was down. He was down on the floor, on his side. Chest heaving in short, shallow bursts, his back legs moving like he was still trying to run, one ear pressed flat against the linoleum. Maya heard herself make a sound she didn't recognize. Sterling turned back to her. His sleeve was shredded at the forearm where Zeus had passed within inches. His jaw was set, but his breathing had changed faster, tighter. Even he hadn't expected that. The cylinder, he said. Last time. She looked past him, at Zeus, at the blood spreading beneath black and tan fur, at the dark eyes still open, still watching her, still asking that same question they'd been asking since the moment she'd opened that side door and let him out into the snow. Something went quiet inside her. The kind of quiet that came just before. She reached to her left and picked up the scalpel from the instrument tray. Then she reached to her right and picked up the canister of pressurized disinfectant. Thorne took one look at her face and backed against the wall. I told you, she said to no one in particular. He's in critical condition. She hit the overhead lights, every last one. She killed the lights, all of them. Every switch in one sweep of her forearm across the breaker panel beside the supply room door, and the clinic dropped into a darkness so complete that for 2 full seconds nobody breathed. Then she moved. Maya knew this building the way a sailor knows his ship in a storm, not by sight, by feel. 14 steps from the breaker to the instrument cabinet. 7 steps left to the defibrillator cart. She'd mopped these floors, scrubbed these walls, counted these ceiling tiles during the long, dead hours of night shifts when there was nothing else to do. Thorne had meant it as humiliation. He'd handed her a map. She heard Sterling's men trying to organize in the dark, short commands. Hand signals that meant nothing without light boots shuffling for purchase on the slick linoleum. Professionals, but professionals who'd planned for a sleeping man on a gurney and a clinic nurse. Not for this. She came in from the side. The defibrillator caught the first operative across the chest, not charged, used as impact, and she followed it with the pressurized disinfectant canister aimed directly at his face. The chemical hit his eyes, and he went down hard, hands up, gun skittering across the floor. She was already gone before he landed, moving low, using the gurney rails and the cabinet edges to navigate by touch. The second man found her by sound. He grabbed her coat sleeve in the dark, and she let him pull, used his own momentum to redirect, drove her elbow into the junction of his neck and shoulder, the brachial plexus, the cluster of nerves that shut the arm off like a circuit breaker. He dropped. She took his zip tie restraints off his belt because they'd be useful and kept going. From somewhere in the back hallway, a flashlight beam cut the darkness. Sterling, she figured, staying back, running his men forward like pieces on a board. She went to ground behind the nurse's station and waited. That's when she heard Silas. The old janitor had a storage closet at the end of the east corridor, more of a bunk, really, a cot, and a hot plate, and a wall covered in photographs she'd never asked about, but had always noticed. He appeared now at the corridor entrance, a shadow against a slightly less dark background, and she could hear him breathing hard. Shaking. "Girl," he said barely above a whisper. "I know you can hear me." She didn't answer. "I was in the Mekong Delta," he said. 68. River assault. Don't remember most of it anymore, but I remember what it smelled like when things went wrong." A pause. "It smells like that right now." The sound of something sliding across the floor toward her. Heavy. She reached out, and her fingers found the stock of a shotgun pump action old the wood smooth from handling. "Under my cot," Silas said. 30 years. Never needed it. Figured tonight qualifies." She gripped the stock and said nothing for a moment. "Then get into your closet, Silas. Get under the cot. Don't come out until it's quiet." A long pause. "You got enough shells?" "I only need what's in the tube." She heard him retreat, heard the closet door close softly. She was halfway to her feet when she heard it from Liam's room. A sound she hadn't expected. Not Sterling's men, not Zeus. Dragging. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic. Something heavy moving across linoleum 1 inch at a time. She went to the doorway and looked in. Liam was on the floor. He'd pulled his own IV. The saline bag lay deflated beside the gurney, and he'd gone over the side rail. How she couldn't process the man had 3 bullet wounds and had flatlined twice, and now he was moving down the corridor on his forearms, elbows pulling his weight legs, barely participating. In the dim gray light bleeding under the front door, she could see his face. Set, deliberate. Exactly the face of a man with one objective. He reached Zeus and stopped. For a moment, he just lay there beside the dog, chest, heaving forehead, dropping forward until it rested against Zeus's neck. His hand came up and pressed flat over the dog's chest, wound fingers, spreading, applying direct pressure with everything he had left. "I've got you," he said low and broken and completely certain. "I've got you. You don't go anywhere. You hear me, you stay." Zeus's ear moved, one ear twitching toward the voice. Maya stood in the doorway, watching a man with 3 bullet wounds use his last functional reserves to keep his dog alive, and something in her chest did something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Sterling's voice came from the far end of the main corridor. Closer now. "I know you're out of options, Major. The cylinder is in this building. Give it up and we walk away clean." He was lying. She'd read enough of those files to know what clean meant to people like Sterling. Clean meant no witnesses. Clean meant a cover story that involved a gas leak and a February fire in a remote Montana clinic. She pressed her back to the wall beside the corridor junction. Checked the shotgun. 4 in the tube, 1 in the chamber. Through the frosted glass panel of the corridor door, she could see Sterling's outline backlit by one of his men's flashlights 10 feet back, moving forward. Between him and the corridor, blocking the only path to Liam and Zeus, was 12 feet of darkness and 1 pane of frosted glass she could not see through clearly. Neither could he. She had 1 angle. 1 moment. And if she was 6 inches off, she'd hit Liam instead. She closed her eyes, saw the corridor layout, measured it in steps, opened her eyes, raised the shotgun. The shot was clean. Sterling went down at the corridor junction, not dead. She'd aimed for the legs for the takedown, not the kill, and the flashlight, behind him, swung wild as his last standing operative scrambled back toward the front entrance. She heard the SUV engine turn over outside, heard it pull away, fast tires spinning on packed snow. Then silence. The kind of silence that only exists after something terrible has finished happening. Maya lowered the shotgun. Her arms were shaking not from fear, she realized, from the sustained adrenaline of the last 40 minutes finally finding the off switch. She stood in the corridor for 3 full seconds before her legs remembered how to move. She went to Sterling first, secured his weapon, secured his wrists with Silas's zip ties, the ones she'd taken off the operative in the dark. He was conscious, breathing steady, and when he looked up at her, his expression had finally changed. The boardroom calm was gone. What was underneath it was smaller and uglier, and much more honest. "You have no idea," he started. "I have a titanium cylinder with your name on approximately 47 wire transfer records that says I have a very complete idea," she said. "Don't talk." She left him on the floor and went to Liam. He was still down, still pressed against Zeus, hand flat on the dog's chest, but his arm had stopped trembling. The strength that had carried him off that gurney and across the floor on sheer will had finally run dry. He was conscious, barely she could see his eyes tracking her as she came in, but the color in his face was the gray-white of old ash. "Sit rep," he said, the word coming out slow and thick. "Sterling's down. His team is gone." She knelt beside him, started checking his wounds. The sutures had held barely. "You pulled your IV. Had to get to him. You have 3 bullet wounds." "Had to get to him," he said again, like that settled any medical argument she might raise. She looked at Zeus. The dog was breathing. That was the first thing. Still breathing, shallow, irregular, each inhale a visible effort that moved his whole ribcage, but breathing. The chest wound had bled through the gauze she'd applied hours ago and then clotted, which was the only reason he was still alive. His eyes were closed now, and the ear that had moved toward Liam's voice had gone still. She pressed 2 fingers to the femoral artery in his inner thigh and counted. 42 beats per minute. Dropping. "How bad?" Liam said. Not a question exactly. The voice of someone who needed the number, even if the number was the worst possible one. She didn't answer right away. She was already moving, pushing to her feet, going to the supply cabinet, pulling down everything she needed with both hands. Suture kit, chest tube, the portable cardiac monitor she'd hoped she would never have to use on a dog. She came back and set it all down on the floor beside Zeus and started working. "Talk to him," she said to Liam. "Keep talking. Maya, I need him calm and I need his heart rate stable. Talk." A pause. Then Liam's hand moved back to Zeus's neck, fingers pressing gently into the fur just behind his ear. The spot she'd noticed later that was matted down from years of that exact touch. "Hey, buddy." His voice dropped to something she'd never heard from him before. All the tactical stripped away. Just a man. "Hey, I know you're tired. I know." A long breath. "You remember that ridge in Kunar Province, October 2019? You remember what you did?" Zeus's ear gave a single, almost imperceptible twitch. "You pulled Kowalski back by the collar when he walked into that tripwire. You remember that nobody trained you to do that. You just did it because you knew." His jaw worked. "I never told you what happened after. Kowalski made it home. Got a kid now. Little girl. Named her after his mama." A rough exhale. "That's yours, Zeus. That little girl getting to have her father. That's yours." Maya's hands were moving steadily, opening the chest cavity around the wound, locating the nick in the arterial wall that was the primary bleed source. The work she could do. The work she was trained for. But the monitor she'd attached to Zeus's foreleg was showing her numbers she didn't want to see. 38 beats per minute. 35. "Come on," she said under her breath, not to Zeus, not to Liam, to the biology itself, to the stubborn, unreasonable fact of a living thing. "Come on." 32. Liam had stopped talking. She looked up and saw why. His head was bent forward, his forehead on the floor beside Zeus's muzzle, and his shoulders were shaking in the way that had nothing to do with his wounds. Liam Cross, who had been shot 3 times and walked through a blizzard and held a perimeter alone for God knows how many hours, was crying. Not quietly. The sounds coming out of him were raw and ragged, and completely undefended, the sounds of a man who'd run out of ways to hold it together. "Don't you leave me," he said into the dog's fur. "Don't you dare leave me. I'll follow you, Zeus. I swear to God I'll find you. Don't—" The monitor flatlined, one long, unbroken tone, the single most devastating sound in any language. Maya grabbed the portable chest compression unit canine. She'd ordered it on a grant 3 years ago and never opened it. Thank God she'd never opened it, and placed it. Started the sequence. Her hands were not shaking. She would not let them shake. 1 compression, 2, 3. She reached with her right hand and manually clamped the arterial nick, holding it between her fingers, while her left hand worked the compression pad, and she understood on some clinical level that what she was doing was technically impossible for one person, and she did it anyway. 10 compressions. 20. The monitor flatlined. 25. Liam's tear fell from his chin and landed on Zeus's nose. The monitor spiked. 1 beat. Jagged. Weak. Like something knocking on a door from very far away. Then another. Maya exhaled so hard she nearly went forward on her hands. She held the artery, watched the monitor, counted. The beats were coming, irregular, stumbling, but they were coming, one after another, slow and uncertain, and absolutely stubbornly present. She started suturing. She was 3 stitches in when the lights outside went white hot, not 1 beam, 3. Massive. The kind of illumination that came from vehicle-mounted tactical arrays, the kind that turned night into noon. She heard engines, heavy ones, not SUVs, tracked vehicles. Liam raised his head from the floor. His eyes, red-rimmed and wet, went to the front windows. Something moved across his face, not fear. Something older than fear. "Either that's the cavalry," he said, voice wrecked, "or we're completely out of time." The front door of the clinic shuddered under 3 hard knocks. Nobody moved. Maya stayed on her knees beside Zeus, both hands still pressed to his sutured chest, and watched the front door. Liam had pushed himself up onto one elbow. She hadn't told him not to. There was no point. And his right hand had found the operative's weapon she'd set on the floor 2 feet away. His grip on it was unsteady, but his eyes were not. The door opened. Not kicked. Not breached. Opened. The handle turned and the hinges swung inward at normal speed, and the first thing through it was cold air and white light, and then a man in full tactical gear, precision plate carrier. NVGs, pushed up on his helmet, stepped inside, and swept the room in one practiced movement. Then a second man, a third. 4 total, stacking through the entry the way people did when they'd done it 10,000 times, and it had become as automatic as breathing. Their weapons were up but angled low. Not at her. Not at Liam. The patches on their shoulders were not FBI. Naval Special Warfare. Trident insignia. The real ones. She'd seen enough fake credentials in the last 6 hours to know the difference immediately. The lead operator pulled his balaclava down. He was maybe 50, weathered the way coastline gets weathered, not worn down, but carved into something permanent. A jaw like a ship's prow. Eyes that had looked at hard things for a long time and had not looked away. He took in the scene in the corridor without visible reaction. Sterling zip-tied on the floor. The downed operatives. The blood. Liam on the ground, beside a dog with a cardiac monitor clipped to his leg, and a woman kneeling in the wreckage holding the animal's chest together with her bare hands. The commander's gaze moved from Zeus to Liam to Maya. It stopped on Maya. He crossed the room, stepped around Sterling without looking down at him, came to within 3 feet of her and stopped. He drove his right heel down, came to full attention. His right hand came up to the brim of his helmet in a salute so crisp it belonged on a parade ground, not a blood-soaked clinic floor in the Montana mountains at 6 in the morning. "Mission complete, Major Quinn." His voice was the kind of quiet that carried. "Thank you for bringing our brother home." Maya's hands were still pressed against Zeus's chest. She was still in the clothes she'd put on 22 hours ago. Her knees were on linoleum that she would never be able to scrub clean, and her face had done things in the last hour that she had not authorized it to do. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once because it was all she trusted herself to do. Two operators moved to Liam carefully, professionally, already calling his vitals back to someone on a radio. A third produced a field medical kit and crouched beside Zeus, and when Maya started to say something about the arterial sutures, the man held up one hand, and she saw the caduceus patch on his sleeve. Combat medic. She moved aside and let him work and stood up for the first time in what felt like a geological era. Her legs held. She was mildly surprised. Silas came out of his closet at the end of the east corridor. He stood in the hallway in his undershirt and suspenders, taking in the operators and the equipment and the general aftermath, and then he straightened his back the way old soldiers do when something in the room demands it. One of the operators saw him and gave him a small nod. Silas nodded back. That was enough. Thorne was found behind his desk with his office door locked from the inside. He came out when they knocked the handle off. He was escorted to one of the tracked vehicles outside with a hand on his collar and his feet barely touching the ground, and he made a series of sounds that Maya was grateful to stop hearing when the vehicle door closed behind him. Sterling was lifted off the floor, still zip-tied, and walked out between two operators. He didn't speak. The boardroom calm was entirely gone, and what had replaced it was the expression of a man beginning to understand the geometry of consequences. The titanium cylinder came down from the ceiling tile where Maya had hidden it. One of the operators signed for it on a chain of custody form. The process was so routine it was almost funny. Almost. The medical helicopter came in just after 7. The storm had broken, not gradually, the way Montana storms usually quit, wringing themselves out over days. It broke completely, the clouds pulling apart like curtains, and the dawn light that came through was the deep gold of a color that has no name in weather reports, but that people who've been in dark places for a long time recognize immediately. They loaded Liam first. He argued about Zeus and was overruled by 3 people simultaneously, which Maya gathered was unusual for him. Zeus went up next on a rigid litter, the combat medic riding beside him, the cardiac monitor showing a rhythm that was still irregular, but was moving in the right direction. Every beat earned. Maya was standing on the clinic steps, watching the rotors, when Liam's hand found hers through the open side door of the helicopter. His grip was weak. He'd need surgery, 2 weeks of inpatient care, months of physical therapy, and longer than that for the things that didn't show on imaging. She knew all of that. She also knew, holding his hand, that he knew it too, and had decided it was beside the point. "Harper," he said. Her real name, the one she'd buried. She looked at him. "You still in there?" he asked. She thought about the woman who had scrubbed these floors in the dark. The woman who'd listened to Thorne tell her she had no future, and had counted her breaths and said nothing. The woman who had packed 4 years of herself into a box and sealed it shut, and called that survival. Below the helicopter, Zeus was being loaded. His tail moved, twice. Slow, deliberate like a flag at half-mast coming back up. "Yeah," she said. "I'm still in there." The helicopter lifted. The gold light spread across the snow-covered peaks in every direction, turning them the color of something just beginning, and the clinic below grew small and then smaller, and then became just a point on a white landscape that looked from up here almost peaceful. The monitor clipped to Zeus's leg, beeped. Steady. Stronger. Liam closed his eyes. His hand stayed in hers, and somewhere below them in the corridor of a clinic that had seen more than its share of bad nights, Silas turned off the last light. Locked the door. Looked up at the sky for a long moment. Then he went inside to make coffee.